A brand new style has arrived at Yumiko. The Camilla is a stunning high neck Leo, boasting an open wrap back and front mesh chest panel. This latest creation by Yumiko Takashima has more modern flair for a standout look, and for this month only, enjoy a 15% off introductory rate on all ready-to-wear and custom orders. Yumiko is also excited to continue its virtual shopping events through Instagram Live. 2 hosts showcase exclusive in-store options available to ship immediately, with different promotions offered each session. All 3 regions, Berlin, Tokyo, and New York City, have scheduled events for September, and if you haven't tuned in yet, be sure to check them out. Stay connected for new releases, events, and all things Yumiko at yumiko.com and at Yumiko on Instagram. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
Our guest today is Janie Taylor, a former principal ballerina with the New York City Ballet, present-day dancer with LA Dance Project, repetiteur for the works of Benjamin Millepied, costume designer, and creator of the art newspaper Quartermarks. At the New York City Ballet, Janie amassed a broad rep that showcased the full depth and range of her talents in ballets by George Balanchine, Jerome Robbins, Justin Peck, and Peter Martins. After her retirement in 2014, Janie began to explore her talents as a costume designer and repetiteur, creating designs for numerous new ballets and staging works for companies all over the world, such as Dutch National Ballet, Miami City Ballet, and American Ballet Theatre. Janie returned to dancing with the Los Angeles Dance Project in 2016, enchanting audiences once again with her electrifying and unmistakable stage presence. Today we talk with Janie about her broad range of talents and her unlikely career path.
Today we are joined by Janie Taylor via Zoom. Janie is in California. Thank you for joining us, Janie.
Thanks for having me.
Rebecca is in Florida. And I'm in New York. So.
I was just thinking that we're adding Zoom to our intros, and I'm wondering when they're going to sponsor us for this podcast. They're like, whatever, we don't need you. Everyone in the world
they sure
Zoom
don't.
18 times a day.
we're the only people, Zoom's the only place that hasn't had their stock just depleted. Anyways. So, Janie, why don't you just start at the beginning and tell us when you first became involved in ballet and dance?
Like from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the way back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can't really remember it because I was 2. But I think my mom
heard the story.
Yeah, it's the same as everyone. My mom was taking ballet class, and I think she would bring me into the studio while she did her class. So I guess I was begging to take ballet. So she put me in, and pretty much never stopped, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was in Houston. We lived in Houston until I was about 12, and then we lived outside New Orleans. So I went to ballet school in New Orleans every day, and I also went to regular school in New Orleans every day. So I would drive in the morning, usually with my dad, and then go to school, and then go to ballet after.
Mm-hmm. And then come home.
Very
and then
familiar story to every dancer we know.
When did you start to become interested in the way that it could become a potential career path for you? When you started to really take it seriously and realize, I want to pursue this in the future?
Well, I mean, actually, when I was probably when we were still in Texas, I think I broke my leg, just riding my bike and stuff. And then I remember when I got better, they had told me to take double the amount of ballet classes to try to get my leg stronger again. And I think I remember when I started doing that more, I think I was kind of got a little more into it. Other than that, when I was in New Orleans, there was a girl, Aubrey Morgan, who was at my school, and she was maybe a year or 2 older than me. And she had already been going to SAB for the summers, and she was just an amazing dancer already, like at the age of, 13. So I always had admired how beautiful she was. And I could see, I hadn't really heard of SAB yet at that time. So I kind of found out about it from her. And then I would see her come back from the summer and like see her even more improved. And so that kind of got me sort of, I guess, finding out what there was, where I could go. And once I actually got there to New York, I think my first summer program, then I got to see New York City Ballet on stage for the first time. And that was definitely a moment where I was so excited by the way the dancers were moving on stage in that company. And I think that just definitely made me focus on wanting to dance that way, that style. And that sort of, I think, focused my attention on the Balanchine style.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I actually think it's a really nice way for a lot of our younger listeners to see that, the way things start out don't always precipitate the ending. So you weren't accepted into the summer program for a year, maybe? Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't get in the first time I auditioned. And of course I was disappointed, but I went somewhere else, which was like, I went to the rock school and I had like such a great time and I loved that program too. But then when we did get back during the year, like I definitely stood behind Aubrey the entire year. I stood behind her at bar and tried to like learn everything about how she was dancing. Because I knew she had learned all of that at SAB, and I still wanted to go there.
So you just doubled down. You were just like, I accept that, and
I'm like, this is my SAB summer program, standing behind Aubrey.
See,
I love
dual good lessons. See, don't rejection happens to everyone, and then if you work hard, you can be rewarded. So.
That's so interesting too, because you were just kind of copying what she was doing. So just taking that in, not even being told really what was going on, just to kind of intuitively take it on and soak it in. So then what happened the next time you auditioned for SAB for the summer?
So I got in that summer and and I went for 2 summers, and then on my second summer, they asked me to stay for the year, and I did.
So I want to go back for a second to the point you were talking about, how when you were seeing New York City Ballet and you were seeing the dancers, that was like you wanted to dance like them. And obviously I, in my mind, have certain characteristics that define you as a dancer, and I want to see if they match up. Like when you saw them,
probably not at all.
What were the things that you were like, that's what I want to put on myself? Like what did you like about it that you were?
I loved how big they moved. I thought, they have that sort of go for it mentality that you're taught. But you can really see that, like, it's so exciting to watch a dancer really trying to go beyond, each time. It felt like there was so much freedom in the movement. And the speed and the musicality, I think all of those things I just really loved seeing. I hadn't seen, I hadn't really seen any city ballet, anything before then, any videos I watched or.
Right. So then when you were starting to become more exposed, who would you say some of your sort of idols or influences were?
Well, I mean, when I was young, I had read every ballet autobiography. So I loved Suzanne's book, and I was super into seeing any video of her. And Allegra I also really loved her book. And I think I don't know, even just from reading about her, just her individual unusualness was something I loved, and so beautiful, but also had this like beautiful technique to go with that, so I was kind of, at first, I was sort of more into some of the dancers who were no longer there, because those were the ones I was able to see on a video or read about in a book. I mean, I loved Margaret Tracy was still there when I got in the company too. I always loved watching her. Jenny Ringer was like always beautiful. But I mean, I would go every night to the ballet, and whoever was on, Monique, Maria, like everyone, just there was something so special about all of them.
So you said that you really liked visually this style that New York City Ballet was dancing. And when you got to SAB and when you were there for the year, you were starting to be immersed in that style. Was that something that came really naturally to you? And when you put it on your body, you were like, oh, this is what I like. This is how I want to dance. Or did it take you kind of a little while to kind of shift your initial training into that more Balanchine style?
I mean, I was definitely really aware, like my first class during the winter session, that I was like the worst one in the class. But like, just like, you know, that I was really behind, because a lot of the girls, it wasn't their first year for the winter, you know, they'd already been through at least a year of like the training. So I remember feeling like really behind, but I wasn't like depressed by it. I was like, okay, I have a lot of catching up to do, and I'm going to catch up, and I'm going to learn all this stuff. And, I think I've always, I don't know. I don't know that I've ever thought like, oh, this is easy for me, or like adapting to anything is easy. I think ballet is just so hard, no matter which way you're trying to do it. I think it's hard for everybody in a different way. And I definitely, it felt hard for me, but I also like really enjoyed the challenge of that. One of the things I love about dancing is how challenging it is. Just as a person, I love games, and in a way, like learning some sort of technique like that, it's a challenge. It's kind of sometimes can feel like, you know, you have to figure something out, like a game, or and so I've always enjoyed that part of the process. And I mean, I think like one of the things I liked about learning the style was like Susie, for example, one of the teachers, she everything she was teaching you could see how special it was, and to her, and how beautiful it was. And obviously I agreed, like going and seeing performances every night, I could see all those things that all of the teachers talked about in class. And but it really made you feel like the importance they gave to like really doing the differences in the style, made you feel like you were learning something so beautiful. And so, you know, you would have these moments of feeling like in class, maybe if you finally got your tendu all the way crossed, and, you know, you would have moments of feeling beautiful, you know, like not just like, oh, I did it right, but also like, now I feel beautiful because like I can recognize this as the beauty that I'm seeing, that I love to watch so much, you know?
Yeah.
So were there ways other than just sort of obviously giving full attention and focus in class, and you said you went to the ballet every night, were there other ways that you were like, this is part of my catching up experience?
I don't know if I thought of it as part of the catching up experience, but my friends and we also would go to the Performing Arts Library a lot to watch old videos of things, just because, you know, we couldn't really get enough of it. So we would do that, and we would go to the performance pretty much every night.
I hope the kids still go to the library.
I
don't know.
They probably think that everything else feels so accessible, but there's such gems there that you can't see anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, we had less to see online because there wasn't anything online like, you know, when I was a kid. So we had to go and look for it, you know, but like you said, Rebecca, like also there's old gems there that you can't find today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Let's talk about, I'm just going to interrupt Rebecca. Now let's talk about then the transition from school to company. What was your sort of expectation surrounding that possibility? What the workshop experience was like that can often lead to it, that sort of thing. What was your experience in that way?
To be honest, and I don't know that it was very intelligent of me, I had this dream, I wanted to be in City Ballet, and I kind of put all my intention into that. I really didn't think much about what would happen if I didn't get in. It certainly wasn't that I was confident I was going to get in, but I just think as a young person, I didn't really know it was important to think about, what would happen if this didn't happen and have a backup plan. And, I think I would have been happy dancing in any company that did do the Balanchine style and had a Balanchine rep. But I think at that time at the school, there was less, like now there's a lot more, talk about auditions for all the different companies, and different company directors come into class now. And I feel like I don't remember that happening very much when I was there, or I don't know if I was just totally like in my own world unaware, but I know people came to our workshops to see us.
Right. And what did you do for your workshop?
So in my first workshop, I danced in Harlequinade. And I also did the 5 couples in Symphony in 3 movements. And then in my second workshop, I danced in Gounod Symphony. Wait, am I mixing them up? There was also Chris Wheeldon made a ballet on us, Soirée Musicale, for one of the workshops. I think it was probably my second year, but I might be. Yeah, I think the second year was Wheeldon's and Gounod Symphony.
Is it rare to do Symphony in C for a workshop, or Symphony in 3 rather?
3.
Is it rare to do?
It was the only time they did it, right?
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I was like, that's what a cool workshop.
And Ashley's sister was the lead, Rebecca.
Yeah.
She was beautiful. I went to the library to watch that.
Did you?
Yeah, because they put all the workshops there for a long time, then they stopped, but then
that's so cool. What a fun workshop performance. I love that. I hadn't heard that. I love it. Sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to hear more about it.
Who did you work with for Harlequinade? You did Columbine.
Mostly Susie, and Suki a couple times was also there. Yeah.
And then how did your opportunity come about to join the company?
I think at the workshop, maybe at one of the rehearsals, or probably after. I have such a bad memory, guys. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I do remember Kay coming and saying that I'd gotten an apprenticeship. And it was just 2 of us, myself and Melissa Barrick, got in together at that moment. But there had been a group of boys in our year that had gotten in, I think probably at Nutcracker time. So just a few months before they had gotten in like earlier than the workshop. Yeah.
So then your dream has come true. You're in the company. Were there ways that the reality differed from your expectation, or was it just like, okay, here I am in the ballets I wanted to do and everything's great?
So again, I'm not sure how much thought I put into what was my like, what did I think the company was going to be like? It was more like, I just wanted to dance all those ballets, and I was so excited. I was just so excited to get to go there and do that. And I don't think I had planned out what I thought it would be like, which I think was probably good, because then I wasn't like expecting certain things that didn't happen or did happen. I mean, I was definitely very shy and nervous and so scared to go in my first day. But it was nice that some of the guys who were some of my friends had gotten in a couple months before. So felt like at least there were 3 people in the class I knew. But it is very intimidating to suddenly be in a room with all these dancers that you've just loved watching on stage every day, and suddenly you're in the same room as them, and it's you're kind of starstruck.
From there, it wasn't too long before Peter started singling you out and having you learn featured roles and perform them. What were some of those first experiences like?
I mean, they were great. I think the first thing I did was La Valse. And that was
like the first thing.
I think that was the first. What do you think, Michael?
I don't know.
I think you might know better than me.
No, I was actually thinking I don't know this, but you didn't do like a Demi Flower before you didn't put you on.
I wasn't tall enough for flowers, Michael.
No, but I guess that's the Peter way, especially then. If he was interested, he wanted to just like see straight away. So La Valse was really the first thing. That's so special.
It was so special, but also I had never seen La Valse. I had no idea what that was because it hadn't gone in years, and I hadn't discovered it at the library. And thank goodness, like Susie, she continued to help me throughout my career, and today I still talk to her all the time. But so she knew I was getting to learn it, and she sent me a video, actually of Sally Leland, and they had filmed it. So it's this really amazing, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
It's this amazing video, and there's all kinds of like filmings, it's not just a wide shot.
Oh, it was like a TV something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, and it's interesting because, I mean, this tells you how important it is to kind of go and watch things that you're going to do so you have a good understanding of what the piece is. Because, my first rehearsal, I was just learning one of the first little duets, and it's kind of like, this isn't the standard ballet where you're doing ballerina, pique, susu, it's like, it's very mysterious. There's like something kind of a little bit of a story, even though, Balanchine didn't do a lot of story. And so, I was learning the steps, but I didn't fully understand what was going on during this duet or whatever, So then I, thank goodness she had sent me that video, because then I watched it and was like, oh, like, now I understand it's in a ballroom, and, there's this sort of dark thing going on behind what we're watching. And, because, I think right away too, to be doing something that, required, I mean, I don't want to say acting, because I feel like all of Balanchine's works have everything sort of put into the steps already, but you are more of like a character in this piece, and
it's like a mood that you have to convey.
There you go. Yeah.
And it's a young girl, which is maybe why Peter thought of this one, because it is a young girl who's naive, and
I mean, she's literally in white. Like, I mean, it's obvious, like, and everyone else is death is in black. It's about as literally black and white as it can be.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sense. But
and I remember kind of, because I've always been just myself as a dancer when I'm working. It's always been like, I'm always very focused and working hard, and concentrated, and so I think it doesn't always come out on my face until I feel like I know the steps, like you know what I mean. It's, for me, it's always been like, I have to learn the steps, I have to know what I'm doing with my body, with my legs, before I can start to put the rest on top of that, but and I remember, I think because Jock was in the room with me, and I remember him kind of being like, you need to like do the acting, like, show it, like in my second rehearsal, which was like, I was like, I don't even know the steps. How am I supposed to like already do it?
I'm 12.
Exactly. But it's nice. There's always people kind of helping you out. in those ways. And, kind of once I had that video and I had a better understanding of what it was, that was helpful also.
Mm-hmm. So this La Valse, I think, is a really great vehicle for the way that your fans. We need to come up with a name for us. What is a Janie Taylor stan? But in the school, like, I grew up having like butterfly feelings whenever I would see Janie in the hall. And like, in the same way that you're talking about how you felt about Monique and Jenny Ringer and Margaret Tracy, like that's how we all felt about you. But we had this idea because of your stage personality, which was so built on taking risks and that sort of like go for broke movement, that you were like a wild child or like some sort of like crazy rebel. Which obviously like, and you're
total
especially,
opposite.
Yeah, which of course I know you well now, but even when you were younger, I'm sure you were even more, well, you were saying you were very shy. So
it's interesting you're saying that, because one thing that I love about dancing and performing is I always felt like I got to be somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on stage, I got to be a different person if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that was some beautiful goddess or some crazy, creature, animal, or whatever, I felt like I got to be somebody different than who I was all day long. You know what I mean? So,
right.
Yeah. And it's like on stage, that you have rehearsals and people are stopping you. It's like the one time no one's going to interrupt you. And like, you know what I mean? So it's really like you have this moment, this uninterrupted moment to kind of do whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like we're talking about that you were quite a fearless dancer when you were dancing, still are. Did you have were you ever nervous on stage? Like what was your stage fright situation? Were you just always like, oh, I can't wait to get on stage, everything's going to be great? Or were you kind of in the back of your mind having a panic?
I mean, it really depended on what I was doing. I feel like for that first one, La Valse, like I was just so excited to have the opportunity, and La Valse was like I didn't have to do any pirouettes, like it wasn't
love
like
those ballets.
I know, right? It wasn't like technically hard.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting to dance with some great partners who were experienced, older. I wasn't with another like apprentice. I wasn't an apprentice, but like brand new person my age. So that was comforting to feel I had like
stability,
good people holding me up. Right. I wanted to go down. So I remember I was really excited about, and I was of course a little bit nervous, but not in a debilitating way. I think I definitely had times where I was very nervous for something. I think it really just depended on what was being asked of me in the piece. If it was something that was difficult for me, that of course would make me more nervous. If, even just the amount of rehearsal time I had, if I had felt comfortable in it because we worked on it a lot, I would be a little less nervous. But I certainly wasn't like never nervous.
Right.
Only for like a role I had done for 5 years now and felt super comfortable in, then I would maybe not get nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how those non-nervous people exist. There are those people and I know. It.
But I feel like I found ways to help myself with that too. Like, I found like, cause turning was always difficult for me. And I found that if I really, during rehearsal, if I tried to like figure out what were the things that were helping me do this turn well. And if I was able to, when it was about to happen, just sort of talk to myself and give myself those directions on how to do it, correctly or well. And then that would help me sort of not go to like the nervous feeling if I was focused on that. If I didn't do that, you know, I'd be like, oh my God, it's the turn. And then you know, in my head, I'd just be like screaming. So I found and then, you know, then it was just up to chance.
Yeah.
So I felt like, you know, as I got older, I wanted things to be less up to chance and more in my control, even though, as we know, you can't control nearly anything.
No.
So when you did your performance of La Valse, did you have a sense of how it was received by Peter and the staff and that things would continue that way? Or was it just like, okay, back to the grind the next day, whatever the rehearsal schedule is?
I mean, I can't totally remember, but I think they seemed happy with it, like, you know, at the end of the performance. And I don't think it was too long before I was like called to learn something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's not like I went back and then was like waited another year. Right. But I also, honestly, when I got into the company, like what I wanted was I wanted to be I wanted to be one of the senior core girls who danced every single piece every single night. Mm-hmm. Like that was kind of like my goal. I didn't really get in and think like, I'm going to be a principal dancer. Mm-hmm. It was more about like, I wanted to dance everything.
Right.
You know, like,
and you got that opportunity, but in principal parts.
I know I didn't get to do nearly as much of the core stuff I was like looking at wanting to learn, or even stuff I understudied. And not for that reason, but sometimes I just didn't get to do it, you know?
Yeah.
But I think you had a career kind of like, you know, someone like Allegra that you idolize, like both of you, you know, when you first come to mind, you think of like, I think of both of your magnetic stage presences and that sort of like special quality about you. But then, you know, you did tons of technically demanding things too. Like it wasn't just like, oh, here comes Janie, the weird one.
That just happened like later on. Then it just became only the weird things. They were like, we're just going to just have you do this now.
No. I mean, you were always special but you were so technically gifted too. I don't think you give yourself enough credit. Like they still made you do Tarantella and, you know, like third movement Bizet and square dance and like these great, super grueling parts. Mm-hmm. So did that stuff come sort of like after you'd had a few things under your belt and you were feeling more comfortable? Or was that a little bit more like you were saying, like, here comes the turn?
Yeah. Well, Tarantella was probably the second thing I did.
Okay.
And so that was like all of a sudden, yeah, like a lot of technique and jumping and turning. Mm-hmm. I think also, you know, when you're younger, you're not as scared and you kind of don't realize how hard what you're doing is. Mm-hmm. It's like as you get older, you're like, this is very hard what I'm trying to do. And then you start to sort of think about that, you know, like when you're younger, you have that sort of like, you know,
carefree.
Yeah,
nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely remember Tarantella was so hard. Mm-hmm. And I know I remember going to watch a video of it after, and I was horrified. But I mean, I've never, like, I had to stop watching videos of myself for years because I just couldn't. It actually wasn't helpful for me because I would be, you know, I wouldn't be able to just see some corrections I wanted to work on the next time. It's like, I felt like, I don't why am I being allowed to do this? Like It was like too much, but I think, you know, I think that's very normal for dancers. Yes, yeah. Not, you know, you can't see yourself the way other people see you. Like, you know, so I had to just sort of be like, I guess it doesn't matter if I think I'm good, like, you know, but I love doing it. And if someone else is okay with it, then I'm just going to keep trying my best and enjoy it.
That's always the best way to go, you know, divorce yourself from it and be like, you know, you don't actually matter. It's the public that's paying for it. So if they're not complaining, well, I'll keep going.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, Tarantella for sure was hard, and I remember that. I forget what your question was. It was
just like the difference between something like that and La Valse. And although you didn't do Sonambula at the time, that's another role I think a lot of us will associate you with forever. Like these sort of like special ballets that require like I guess perfume or like mystery and those things that like come to mind when anyone thinks of you. But you also had to do things that were just like super hard. Just
I
like
think
bomb hard.
Yeah, I think I did the bulk of the hard stuff in my younger years, to be honest. Which is probably when you should be doing it because you're young and you're strong and I mean, I got promoted to principal when I did square dance. And then and I feel like the older I got, I think, well, also for me, I had a lot of injuries and stuff like that would keep me out for a while. And then I'd have to sort of come back slowly. And I think that's actually when they started putting me in some of those like more romantic roles or like more adagio or, less of the crazy jumping just because like I couldn't do it yet. And, and in some ways that was great because I got to start exploring like other types of roles. Sometimes you get very put into one category. So I think that helped me get to try some other types of things. But then I feel like I didn't necessarily go back into as much of that more technical stuff either after that. So, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
But one thing I remember you telling me, I think, correct me if I'm wrong.
I never said that.
Well, you were cast in a lot of things that required a big jump, like thermomobile, because you had one. But I think I remember you telling me one time that you didn't when you were younger. And then one day you were just like, oh, I guess I have to like jump now.
Well, I do remember a moment in Susie's class at SAB. And I guess I wasn't jumping very much. I guess I wasn't a good jumper. And some correction she gave me just suddenly clicked. I could jump like really well. And and I was sort of like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know. Yeah, sometimes you need someone to help you figure out how to do something.
We will return to Conversations on Dance in a moment, but first, we want to introduce you to the newest venture from choreographer and friend of the pod, Trey McIntyre. Trey has put together an innovative way to access new dance films created by world-class artists via Patreon. Welcome to Flatpak. Flatpak is an online subscription service that gives viewers access to one-of-a-kind original dance works created by dance makers from all around the world. Access to these works is exclusive to Flatpak's Patreon platform. Each month, subscribers to Flatpak's Patreon page will get access to 2 world premiere dance films every other Friday night, as well as immersive behind-the-scenes content. You can join now for as little as $1 per film by visiting fltpk.com or clicking the link in the description of this episode. Money raised for each film goes directly to the artists involved in the creation of the film. If you want to hear more, listen to our most recent interview with Trey in episode 194, where he tells us how this idea came about and his overall vision for the platform.
You mentioned a little bit some injuries that you had dealt with, and you spent a long period of time off stage. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those injuries and your recovery process and kind of what your mental state was like during those times when you couldn't be on stage?
I mean, I think, one of my early injuries was like a stress fracture, which is very common. And that was when I was pretty young. Maybe I had just been there for 2 years. And I mean, it's just devastating when you get injured. I think for all dancers, it's kind of, especially when you're young, you're like, oh, what's going to happen when I come back? Like I was learning Western Symphony at, one of the principal roles. And then, suddenly you're not going to get to do that and you're out. And then you kind of don't know when you come back, will you have that opportunity again? Or, but also more than that, it feels disappointing in the moment that you're missing something, but more than that, you're like just wanting to be able to dance, period, So I always had a similar experience, I think, with my injuries, no matter how old I was. I think when I was older, I got a little more like able to be like, okay, it's okay. This happens. Right. I know what it's going to be like. Try not to freak out about it, but it's hard. I think we're sort of in this, you're in this bubble with the same people every day, working, dancing together, and our days are, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. like every day. And then suddenly you're not a part of that. And it can feel very isolating because also all your friends are at work but they're also so busy. They, it's hard for them to find time to call you and see if you're okay. They do, but also like, I know what it's like too. It's all day. Mm-hmm. So it can be kind of lonely and isolating in that way. But, you always have what you're looking forward to, which is getting yourself better and getting back, to dancing again. Mm-hmm. It's also maybe not so much in my younger injuries, but when I was older, I realized these are all opportunities for me to think about other interests I have and, spend some of this time learning something new or doing something that I like to do that I never have time to do, and kind of trying to be productive in that kind of way instead of just sitting and like counting down the days.
Right.
Right. When can I try a tendu at PT and,
right.
Trying to,
I'm realizing that dancer injuries are just a smaller scale of COVID-19 quarantine, maybe. Lonely and isolating, counting down the days and learning.
Let's try a new skill.
Totally. We are all well equipped for this.
That's, definitely something we wanted to get to later on down the line in the interview was that you do so many different things, but that's interesting. I had never thought about that. I'd never thought about them in that context, but you've created costumes for numerous different works. Like you have your own quarterly art magazine, Quartermarks, that we love. And you're a skilled artist yourself. Like you have all these different things that any person would be lucky to have one. And so you started like nourishing those sort of things when you were younger, dealing with injuries.
Yeah, I would say some of them I did, definitely. I think it's also for me, it's like, I always have this feeling that I like have to be creating something. So like, it's just like something from within, I think. So, and dancing certainly satisfied that for me. But so then, when suddenly I couldn't do that, I still had this need to be creative, I guess. I think some of the like sewing sort of, later on maybe became costume stuff. I did some of that during my injuries, and it would be better if I really tried to learn how to do some of these things. But I think like I tend to try to teach myself how to do it. So it's like, not exactly perfect, not exactly right, but like,
close enough.
Yeah. But I think
there were fewer Google tutorials out there, YouTube tutorials. Like,
yes, exactly.
I finally learned how to cut an onion during quarantine. So,
well, that's great.
Yeah. But it made me think back because before, I would never cook before, but if I did, I'd just be like, I guess a knife goes in and, this.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not to derail too much, but when you first started sewing, a lot of dancers do sew, knit, that sort of thing to kind of create their own fashion items for the studio. Was that kind of how you got started, kind of maybe creating leotards, those sorts of things? How did you?
Yeah, I definitely made myself leotards. My mom can sew really well. And she showed me how to use a machine. So I know how to use the machine, but like I think it's probably very simple, but like I can't use a pattern. I have to like make up my own pattern that like I understand how to build or how to make off of, but it's totally not great. But But I think in some ways, like, we spent so much time learning this craft, like ballet. We went to school for it. You're still learning it and studying it while you're a professional. Like it never really ends. And I think in some ways I'm like, oh, I can't imagine spending this much time to learn another thing.
Right.
So I think that's part of why I'm like, I can just figure this out.
Skip these steps.
I can just do it my own way because it's just for me, and nobody cares. So I think that's part of it.
That's funny. I can do that with things too, and I've never really thought about it that way. I'm like, ugh, I could read things, but like whatever, I'll just figure it out.
Yeah. But funny. Also, at one point, I did try to do school like at the beginning while I was dancing, and I just was like, it was hard for me, the amount of focus I wanted to put on dancing, and I wanted to put that equal amount into school, but that was obviously impossible because it's just, or for me, it was impossible to feel that I could put as much time and effort into it. And so it was kind of like, I felt like I could only do one thing in that intense of a manner. Right. But I mean, so many other people are able to do that. I think it's hard for me maybe I
couldn't do it either.
Same. I'm glad we're all on the same page, because every time we interview someone who went to college and it's like, I did 17 courses.
I know. I'm like,
year I was promoted to principal, and I'm just like,
I know. Like, it's so impressive. I mean,
it really is
very impressed by it.
Yeah. When I would get home from work, all I'd want to do is just like sit and look at the wall for like 2 hours and just compress.
It's totally exhausting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you say that you weren't required to do any of the hard stuff anymore once you started to sort of cope with different injuries, but you were debuting in things all the way through to the end of your time in New York City Ballet, and super legendary parts. So, Somebody in 3 Movements, which I think you've said is the hardest ballet you ever did. That came a little bit later.
Yeah, that was later. That was, I thought that was very hard. Like hard in a different way though than like square dance would be the technically hardest thing I did. Right. And also, I mean, you guys know square dance is exhausting no matter which role you're doing in it. I think that one maybe surprised me at what
stealth
was hard about it.
No, it's exactly. It's really hard. I don't know why it doesn't get enough appreciation for that. Yeah. But you have to you go from your solo into the 6 Principles dance, which is just like vom.com. And then you have to do your whole pas de deux while everyone else is waiting. And then you do the finale.
I mean, the pas de deux is the easy part.
The rest, yeah.
I think I had also thought, because I had done a lot of different roles, even starting in workshop in that ballet, I was like, oh, I know all these steps, like, they're in my body somewhere. But it was kind of like the longevity, and also doing PK turns in a circle with people around you, like going in the opposite direction. That was just very difficult for me.
That's so funny. That must be really, I was always like the little running girl, and I was just like, focus, don't hit her. But I'm sure because you are going the other way, it must be like create a dizzying effect. Well,
I remember too, because I did that as well as a core girl. And I remember like our ballet mistress like being like, look at Miranda. Like also, Miranda goes on the list from before.
Oh, Miranda.
Somebody I loved watching.
Yeah.
And we would be staring at her like, don't hit her, and she
stay
in
like,
line. And she I think could like stay in a circle, but like, that wasn't my strength. But I kind of remember doing it, and our ballet mistress telling me like, look for the girls, like when I was doing the pink girl, and I was like, what? I was like, they're running.
How am I supposed to do that?
I'm turning and I'm supposed to be looking at them. I was like, no, I remember doing this in the core, and you told us to look at her because obviously she can't see anything. And I mean, anyway, that wasn't why it was a struggle. It was a struggle just because that was hard for me. But
That's a lot of turns.
I think either core girl or principal girl, that's a stressful moment. In that menage for sure.
So you retired from New York City Ballet much younger than I'd say the average principal woman does. A lot of women go into their 40s. So what was behind that decision to sort of leave a little on the early side?
Well, my husband, Sebastian, who was also Sebastian Marcovici, who's also principal at the time with me, he's like 5 years older than me. And he had a very bad foot injury that he was kind of like, wasn't going to be able to fully recover from. And he was getting ready to finish. Mm-hmm. He was like 38 at the time. And then our good friend Benjamin Millepied, who had left before both of us, he kind of had wanted Sebastian to come out, and he had already moved out to LA and was working on LA Dance Project. He knew he was going to be going to Paris at that time, and he wanted Sebastian to come with him. Mm-hmm. And so, it wasn't just a decision about me, it was a decision about us. And I had felt like, Sebastian always knew he wanted to be a ballet master afterwards. And he was, here he was getting this opportunity, and also with one of our great friends who we admire and believe in, to add to that. Mm-hmm. So, I put a ton of thought into it, and I had sort of felt like I knew, what if I stayed 5 more years? I felt like I knew what those 5 years would be like. Mm-hmm. Not that means they would be bad or anything. Mm-hmm. Like, just that I felt like I knew I'd be doing all the things I'd been doing, which were all things I loved. I was totally happy with my career and everything. But I felt like just sort of knowing, and of course, like, you can't really know, like,
sure.
Years, it's like 1 year, 8 principals are out and suddenly you're doing all this stuff you would have never maybe been put into, like, of mm-hmm. course, stuff like that can happen and you can't plan on that. But I felt really satisfied with everything I'd gotten to do. I felt like I had gotten to do so many great things, and I always had felt like I didn't know if I wanted to dance until I was like 40, mm-hmm. just in the sense that, and like 40 is this number, like I don't know, that's just in your head. It doesn't really mean anything, right. but I didn't really want to keep doing ballet, like, when I didn't look good anymore. Like, it was important to me to not just keep doing it because I wanted to do it, but mm-hmm. like, I wasn't doing it well, Mm-hmm. And I, and in some ways with a lot of my injuries, I felt like I already wasn't doing things as well as I used to. Just, that's how I felt. And I kind of felt like, Sebastian and I could retire together, which would be like a really nice thing for us, because we also spent most of our careers dancing together anyway. I was like, mm-hmm. oh, what if he's retired and, I'm not dancing with him anymore? I mean, I had other amazing partners I also was frequently with that I loved too, but, it kind of felt like something we could do together, which would be special for us. And, mm-hmm. I just felt like it was okay to do mm-hmm. it then, and mm-hmm. that I was satisfied. I think no matter what, no matter when, it's always mm-hmm. hard for a dancer to stop dancing.
Yeah.
So it just felt like the right moment.
Yeah.
What did you end up choosing to retire with?
Well, so yeah, we did La Valse. So I did La Valse, and because Sebastian was also my partner in La Valse the first time we did it. So yeah, and then we did Afternoon of a Faun together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't really, I mean, it was a surprise to Peter when we came in to tell him, like, we thought we were going to retire. And, we were kind of like, we saw this program on the schedule. It has La Valse and Faun. Like, we'd just love to do those two things. Like, we don't have to create some big program.
So right after your retirement, what was your first step? Where did you guys go right away?
We came to LA, and Sebastian started working with LA Dance Project while we were kind of like, there was maybe 6 months before the Paris thing would be happening. So we came to LA. I was like, honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just sort of like, I don't know, I'll see what happens. I'll try different things. And, like, I just knew I wanted to be able to do stuff that I felt, I guess, equally passionate about as I did about dancing. So I knew I would want to do something creative, but I hadn't like set something up, to go into right away.
Did that feel exciting to you, or was that scary, kind of making that shift?
It felt exciting, actually. And I also felt like, let's take a little break. Like have some time to just, chill out and think about it. And we were, moving to a new city and everything. So there was like a lot of changes. But I felt happy about it and looking forward to like discovering something new or.
So what were some of those first new opportunities that you had?
Well, right away I started doing some costume stuff. Justin had asked me, some girls were wearing a bunch of my leotards, Rebecca, in class and stuff. And he was like, I think I like these leotards and I think they'd be maybe good for my next piece. And actually we were talking about this while I was still there, because I remember being on tour with him and like meeting with him in a hotel, one of our hotel lobby about it at one point. So I sort of like designed them for stage.
It was for Everywhere We Go was the first one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I love those costumes. They're
Thank
so
you.
pretty.
I love them.
Really
so
fun.
So that piece premiered once I had retired, and then I think so people were like, oh, she's doing this.
Yeah.
So then I started to get more people asking me to do costume stuff for them, and LA Dance Project asked me to right away, because we came there and they're like, oh, why don't you do some stuff here? So I was doing costume stuff, and then Justin asked me to go and set Year of the Rabbit. So I started doing that for quite a few companies. And then I also started setting some of Benjamin's works. So I was really bouncing around between costume and setting works.
So were those, obviously like costuming, that was something that came later, as you said, but something like ballet mastering or teaching, was that a consideration that you had in years prior? Like, did you ever think like, oh, that really appeals to me, or that's something I'll be good at?
I think I had maybe thought, I would probably enjoy like coaching somebody in something. I hadn't put a lot of thought into it. Honestly, like, I feel like as a dancer, I always felt, and this isn't negative to me, but I always kind of felt like I was still a student. Like even when you're like higher in the ranks, like you're always learning still, or I think it's important to like be open to continuing to learn, like if you want to keep growing as a dancer. So it was hard for me to be like, oh, I want to go teach people ballet. Cause to me, I was like, what do I have to teach? Like, I'm still doing it. Like, I'm not, I don't know. So I hadn't thought a ton about that, but, I did like, and I also was like, I think the first one I did was for Benjamin, and I like flew to Germany, and like, I'd never done it before. I didn't know what I was doing. And
you're always up in Germany.
I know.
I love you in Germany.
I spent a lot of time there. And I was like, I don't, no one like teaches you how to teach a ballet or whatever. I just kind of was like, all right, let me figure this out. I think for me, like my best tool is my body and being able to demonstrate like the dance and everything. So I started by just like learning the whole dance as if I was going to dance it myself, which also helped me understand, you know, the movements and, you know, how to do them the right way and everything. I kind of figured that out through my own body. And then, but I really loved it. I loved getting to share, you know, a piece that I loved with other dancers and the excitement of watching them learn something new that they were probably, hopefully excited about doing. And sort of, yeah, like, I don't know, sharing that with them. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that even though you said that nobody tells you how to stage a ballet, teaches you, you did. You taught me.
Well, good.
I remember I asked you.
We have to help each other.
Yeah. And that was the exact advice you gave me. And I did exactly that. And you showed me how to do notes, you know, within a framework. So
the notes the way that I probably made up myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than learning the actual way.
But you were like, you're going to have to figure out something that works for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I don't know. I think that is and the only way that you can get it out is if you put it in your body, because at least personally, my brain isn't going to store it all. And looking at a piece of paper, like I've never had to actually look at what a step is on a piece of paper because because it's in your body, not because it's like, oh, what work, I know it all, but it's just because, like, can you imagine being like, you have to look at something and go, so take Lisa Padisha, and then translate that in your brain and then tell someone what it is. That's crazy.
It takes too much time.
Yeah. So did you ever expect that you would return to the stage and be dancing again during this time? No.
The answer to that is no.
So how did that come about?
Well, you know, Benjamin, it's funny because we were at my retirement party for City Ballet and he was there and we had all these old videos playing of us, you know, and he was like watching them and then he was like, you know, you can come and dance for us at LA Dance Project. And I was like, this is my retirement from dancing party. Like, what are you talking about? I was like, that's crazy. And, you know, I was just kind of like, haha, okay. But like, you know, he was serious and, but you know, we were living in Paris and I wasn't thinking about dancing at all. But actually through teaching, I was like, I felt like I started to dance better. You know, and some of those things I had felt like I wasn't doing so great anymore myself as a dancer. I was like, I was getting better at them by teaching other people how to do them. And, you know, suddenly I was like, I had also, from leaving dancing, I had left behind sort of the stress of injury, which is just you constantly telling yourself like, I don't know, can I do this much today? Is my calf going to hold up? And you're putting these like restrictions on yourself or I was, of like what I can do, you know? And
by that you mean like walk up the stairs, but also in class, like, you know, I wouldn't do all the jumps because I knew I had a lot of jumps in rehearsal later and I had a lot of calf problems. So I was always sort of planning out my day to get all the way to the end of the day, which is a smart thing to do. But at the same time, I feel like I wasn't, you know, you're not gaining strength that way. You're kind of just holding at like a certain
You're just trying to get through.
And you're not like, like I was trying, I would also, and just because sometimes I was kind of injured, but still able to dance some, it's like I would try, which was a helpful thing. I kind of learned to use my brain a little more than just my body. So I could do things well the first time I tried them so that I wouldn't have to try a step like 10 times in rehearsal and then like, oh, my calf went, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but then in a weird way, you're like also kind of losing strength by not doing a lot of repetition. It's just like a tricky, you know, if you're somebody who is prone to certain types of injuries, you know, or has whatever, which at times in my career, like I was, But since it didn't matter if I was injured because I was just a teacher now, not just a teacher, but I wasn't performing.
Right.
I allowed myself to do a bunch of stuff I probably shouldn't have been doing, but I didn't get hurt doing it. I started getting stronger, and, I'd be showing like an entire male variation with tours and everything. And I was like, how am I doing this? Like, I didn't think I could do stuff like this anymore, Right. And then in a way you're like, oh, here
Darn
I am doing more than what I thought I could do when I was dancing. And, and it wasn't like, oh, I wish I hadn't quit dancing. Like, I was just like, oh, this is so interesting. This is happening now. And this is kind of crazy. And, but anyway, eventually, to answer your question, Benjamin wanted to make a little piece for the two of us. And he also had not danced for years, way more years than me. So now it had been about 2 years for me, I think, of not dancing. So he wanted to make a duet on us to do in one of his LA Dance Project galas. So I said, all right, why not? Because also at that time I was, I always loved dancing Benjamin's works at City Ballet that he made, and the ones we did on gigs, not at City Ballet, and teaching his pieces was great because I loved the movement. And then I assisted him when he made new works at Paris Opera. So I got to be in the studio while he was creating that stuff. And that was, I loved learning that movement and everything.
Right.
So I was like, sure. I mean, I don't think either of us was taking class or doing anything, but we were just like, he started making this little duet on us. And so we performed it at one of their galas. And so that was the first time I performed again, but I still wasn't really like, okay, I'm going back to dancing. I was just like, well, that was fun, and fun to be with one of my partners from, years ago, like, and then, so we all decided to go back to LA from Paris. And so then it's like, okay, so Sebastian was obviously going to ballet master LA Dance Project. And I was like, well, what am I going to do there? or will I do something else? And Ben still kept saying, like, you should dance. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll give it a try. If I hate it, I'll stop doing it, whatever, it's not.
Yeah.
And so then that's how I kind of got back into it. I mean, there were things I was missing about dancing. But those are just not to some extent that I was, depressed over it, or I wasn't happy doing other things. But just kind of recognizing those things that you don't even notice when you're a dancer. Like, this is something I love about dancing. It was interesting to kind of identify those things in the absence of dancing. And
what are some of those things?
Well, I think you just, you kind of take it for granted in a way. Like, you don't realize, like I just missed hearing amazing music all day long. Like,
yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even realize, like, I'd be like, oh, I guess I'll turn the radio on because, like, where's the music, or just, it felt funny. I guess I had, I did a lot of partnering stuff, and the sensation of my body being in the air was like something I was missing. Like I would notice, like, oh, it's so weird just to be down, like, and just obviously it's a joy. I think it's like a human instinct just to move to music, and just the joy of that simple instinct. And, being around your friends, like, all day, working with all your best friends all day, like, it's so much fun in the studio, that just sort of camaraderie, being part of a big group that has a shared, much larger goal. I think I loved that without knowing it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So a lot of the rep that you have danced at LA Dance Project has been really opposite of what you were performing at New York City Ballet. And it just makes me think of what you were saying earlier, that sometimes you like to treat things mentally like it's a sort of a game that you have to like accomplish XX and then X. That doesn't make sense. You have to accomplish things to win the task. So is that like, what was that like learning something that is, you know, something you've been doing all your life and yet at the same time sort of foreign?
I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes I feel like I'm, you know, the one in the room who doesn't know anything. And meanwhile, I'm older than everybody, you know, I'm the oldest one. And I've, you know, danced the longest, but like, sometimes I'm like, I'm the one who knows the least right now at this moment. Which is sometimes great and sometimes feels terrible, you know, to be honest. But I mean, in some ways at first, I didn't really feel like I was doing anything that different because a lot of it is Ben's work. So his movement feels familiar to me, even if it's like not in a point shoe. I mean, it took me a long time to figure out how to not be in a point shoe also, because I had almost never danced on flat ever. And that's like very different. But it's also interesting seeing differences, like, you know, even if you have a new choreographer come in, like at City Ballet, all the dancers who are in this piece in the rehearsal, they've all had like the exact same training.
Right.
So we tend to kind of zero in on the same things that a choreographer is doing. You kind of pick it up similarly. It was so interesting and we had a couple other ballet trained dancers who had just danced, you know, in ballet companies also when I was there and when I started. And it was so interesting because we'd all be watching Benjamin, you know, to pick up the choreography. And then we'd look over and like none of us were doing anything similar to each other. Like it was so crazy. I was funny. Like, how can we all be watching the same thing and come up with like totally different versions of this? And I think it's because we were just taught about movement in different ways. So we're like looking at it in a different way. And like, I don't know, it's so interesting. So sometimes my struggle was like, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm focusing on Benjamin. I'm going to learn the thing he's doing. And then I'd be like, oh, but I'm not doing anything anyone else is doing in the room. And we're moving on. Like, you know, and so now I feel like I don't know the dance at all because like I'm not doing the same thing. So
this sounds like the girl behind Aubrey Morgan panicking.
It always comes back to me trying to look like everybody else, which is just as hard as I try. That's another thing. I feel like I was always trying to look like the other dancers and like, just, I don't know. It's like, I feel like some people are like, oh, you have your own thing you're doing. And I'm like, I'm just trying to look like her. I'm not trying to do something different. It's just happening. So yeah, I don't know. It's, it's been very interesting to sort of like be with dancers with different training, and all of us have to sort of come together and, you know, unify in some kind of way. I mean, during my time not dancing and when Sebastian would be working with LA Dance Project, I would just follow them like a groupie, like whatever country they went and toured in, I followed them and I watched every one of their performances. And I loved the dancers. Like they were also individual, but as a group, they could just really dance as a group together in a beautiful way. And it was like very exciting. I was very inspired by them and, you know, how they could move. And at this time it was all contemporary dancers. So yes. So then we did do some other types of, this is what you were asking, non-Benjamin choreography that maybe would have been way more out of the box for me. And some of it, like, I mean, I have not been successful at, but I have always been very determined. Like, you know, I want to learn this other thing. Like I have this opportunity. Like I maybe didn't join this company because I thought I want to be a contemporary dancer now. I didn't think that.
Right.
I just thought it would be nice to dance again. And it's Benjamin and I love doing his movement. So I'd love to be here and do a little bit more of that, you know. But, you know, once I'm there, I'm like, well, I want to learn about all these other things too, since they're happening around me, and it's, it's fun. It's like in class, we alternate between like a contemporary class and a ballet class,
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, but it's like in the contemporary classes for me, they've all gone through all the training of all the different modern dance styles at school. Right. So it's like, there's not time for someone to stop for just me in the back and like explain every, detail of this technique and that my weight should be here or there. So a lot of times I feel like I'm copycatting, and I can do the movement that they're doing, but in my head, I'm like, I know there's a lot to this, or like, maybe I'm not doing it correctly, just because I know in ballet, there's so many, your weight is in a specific place. The place where your toe is very specific, so it's like, I know there's just as much, for all these other modern techniques. But yeah, I'm the one in the room who's literally had, my first contemporary class was there,
I like that you're kind of back in that same spot of teaching yourself something new.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. You keep finding those same things. So just before we let you go, because we know you have a meeting. So right before we let you go, and we've taken so much of your time and we appreciate it. It's been so much fun to chat with you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, but before we go, we do have a little lightning round that we prepared for you. We're just going to ask you one quick question, and you tell us the first thing that comes to mind. No trick questions. You're good. Don't worry. Okay.
Stressful.
First thing is dream role that you didn't get to dance.
Bugaku.
Oh. Yeah.
Second question. Favorite onstage memory?
Probably my first La Valse.
Dream ballet to stage.
It would probably really be really fun to do any Balanchine ballet.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that's keeping you sane during quarantine?
Nature.
Yes, you got to get outside.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta get outside.
All right, Janie.
Oh, that's it.
You.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to share with everyone. And
thank you for having me.
you.
I loved talking to you guys.
That was great. Thank you, Janie.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you would like to support the Conversations on Dance podcast, there are a few ways that you can help. Click over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Download episodes when you listen to allow our analytics to better understand our listenership. Join our Facebook group, Conversations on Dance, Friends of the Pod, or you can offer a donation. Conversations on Dance has always been and will always be free to our listeners. You can help us continue to create and produce this unique behind-the-curtain look at the dance world by visiting conversationsondancepod.com/support. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.